So what is love? We're going to talk about that today, but first I got to tell you the lame joke I looked up on the internet. So there's this huge wedding, this couple, their parents spend all the money and all the friends come, and it's a massive endeavor. And after the wedding, the husband goes to his bride and he says, honey, I hope you don't mind or you won't mind, but now that we're actually married, I thought I'd mention a few little defects that I've noticed about you. And of course, she immediately says, well, I don't mind at all because it's those little defects that kept me from getting a better husband. Come on, people. God knows that's true. All of us married up, yes? I mean, at least us guys did. So it's a universal truth that men who love their wives do not point out the little defects if there are any, yes? It's a universal truth because it shows a lack of sensitivity. It shows a lack of love. It certainly shows a lack of understanding. It certainly shows that if you're poking fun at her or if you're pointing out her weaknesses or her drawbacks, that you really don't get it. Am I right? Am I right? But often when we come to the church, that's kind of what happens. We come as the bride of Christ, yes, but we're all like individual voices, and sometimes we forget that it's not about us, right? And so what we do is we start doing that. We start doing that, pointing out, picking at. And so I wanted to share with you today some verses. We'll go back to the thing my sons read. Good job, guys. I think they're both going to be pastors. But I recommend a job that pays more because I'm going to need some old folks' care. No one's laughing, anybody, anyway. So Paul wrote a letter to the Corinthians. And in almost every wedding, you'll hear these verses read. Why? Because they talk about love. But it's an interesting point that most people that are probably getting married are not actually theologians. They don't know that the verses really have not a whole lot to do with erotic love. They have more to do with the church. And so when Paul wrote these verses that most of us know, don't think about a wedding. Think about this room right now where we're sitting. Are you with me? Paul says, 1 Corinthians 13, 4-8, love is, it does not, it is not, it's not easily, it keeps no record of, love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth, that always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres, love never. Now he's writing to brothers and sisters. And he's saying, why do you do this stuff to each other and then say that you love one another? But they were doing all of that stuff, right? Keeping records around what did you hear about whatever and backbiting and hurting each other. And there's a lot more to the letter and to the story. But I just wanted you to know that this letter is not written to intimate lovers. It's written to the bride of Christ. And so it's an instruction letter, if you will, for us on how to treat one another. Are you with me? Okay. So God doesn't just tell us how to love. He actually goes even a step further and he shows us how to love. And the ultimate picture is the cross, right? He shows us how to love. And he says, if you're going to be a Christ follower, if you're going to imitate me, then you need to deny yourself. Pick up your cross and follow me. And he does that himself, showing us the way. Paul also goes on later to the Ephesians, and he talks about husbands and wives and families and how it's done. And this is actually more aimed at, if you will, the intimate relationship in our homes. But it also has a picture of the church. Listen to this. Ephesians 5. This is the 25th verse to the 27th. Husbands, love your wives. How? Even as Christ also loved the church, and he gave himself up for it, that he might sanctify it and cleanse it with the washing of water by the word, that he might present it to himself as a glorious church, not having spot or wrinkle or any such thing, but that it should be holy and without blemish. Did you see how he made the change? Husbands, love your, just as Jesus loves the church. The bride is the church. The bride is the church. And so then he goes into it and he says, listen, don't you get this? You got to sanctify your relationship with your bride. Cleanse it. Wash it with the word. And he goes on and on and on. And so I'm trying to paint a picture that Jesus is so concerned about his bride. He would die for his bride. And the ultimate example of that is sacrificing yourself for your bride. Yes? Right, but that's not the culture we live in. The culture we live in shops for a church. Well, I'm going to go and shop around for a good church. I get it, okay? I get it, because you certainly wouldn't want to walk into one that has all kinds of theological problems or maybe hateful people. But the whole thought process is wrong, isn't it? That's not the way it works. And so Jesus is the perfect husband. He did the perfect sacrifice, but not only that, he has this wondrous bride that's called the church, but the bride is not perfect, right? Bride is not perfect, but he certainly doesn't stand around and go, look at that defect, look at that defect. Although the Holy Spirit does gently urge us, to move forward and washing us with the word. But he may not have a perfect bride, but he certainly has a perfect love for us, yes? He does. If you guys did not know, this Saturday is Valentine's Day. So if you didn't know that, guys, write it down. This coming Saturday is Valentine's Day, and you're expected to do something extra special for your other significant other, yes? Right. Did you know that in other cultures that it is seen as a serious problem, this Valentine's thing? In a Muslim culture, Hindu culture, and some other cultures, they actually have a really serious problem with this Valentine's Day thing. I want to read something to you. This is actually kind of old, but it's pretty similar to the other things I've read. This is from WorldNet Daily. Despite the sweet and loving connotations of the holiday, Muslim and Hindu leaders in Asia are trying to stamp out the celebration of Valentine's Day by young lovers. While the holiday seems trivial to Westerners, it is a serious issue of cultural tension in other parts of the world. Cities in India have outlawed cards, and guards spent the day clearing campuses looking for couples daring to celebrate the holiday. In Brunei, Valentine's Day has been declared a threat to Islam. Religious leaders fear the, quote, Christian practice of Valentine's Day, and they think it could erode moral values, weaken the community, and destroy Islam. Wow. So love could destroy Islam. In fact, in the end, that's actually what will destroy it, but we're not going to preach about that today. I just find it really interesting that these folks think that Valentine's Day is a Christian practice. Is there anything really about Valentine's Day that's a Christian practice? No, it's more like an erotic practice, right? And it has really a whole lot not to do with the scriptures. Men go out and spend money on their significant others because they're scared to death what will happen if they don't. Right? You didn't even give me. Okay, I'm sorry, baby. And so they line up, at 11:35, midnight at Kroger looking for the card, or the flowers. Every guy knows. Oh no, what have I done? Anyway, I think it's interesting that in this culture, these cultures, Islamic cultures or Hindu cultures, that women are so second-class citizens. They don't even think of women as equals. They certainly don't see them as the way our culture would see them. And I'm not saying we're doing it all right, but they certainly see it differently. And I ran programs in the Middle East for the Air Force. I've been all around the Middle East. I have seen it with my own eyes. It is not the way we do it. Women in those cultures exist principally to take care of any need that a man should get. That's how it works. We are completely different, yes? We are completely different, yes? Although we're not perfect, we are a Christian nation, and our heart supposedly at least was that way. And Christianity is completely different. It has a different focus because Jesus has a different focus. You can write it down. Christianity has a different focus because Jesus has a different focus. And what is his focus? Is it on himself or is it on his bride? Right, he serves the Father, but his focus is on his bride. And so he sets an example of how to love, and it's not a selfish love. And he wants to make sure, above all, that his bride is taken care of. Did you see those verses we were reading? Where he's talking to Peter? I'm going to show them to you in a couple of seconds. Look at it. 21, 15 through 17. When they had finished eating, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you truly love me more than these? Yes, Lord, he said, you know that I love you. And Jesus said, feed my lambs. And again, Jesus said to Simon, son of John, do you truly love me? And he answered, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. And so then Jesus said, take care of my sheep. The third time that he said to him, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Peter was hurt because Jesus asked him a third time, do you love me? And he said, Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you. And then Jesus said, feed my sheep. What is Jesus concerned about? Over and over and over again, he's saying, don't you get it? I care about this. This was the third time that they saw the resurrected Christ. They saw him in the flesh with the scar and the scars. And he comes to them, and what he's most concerned about is his bride. Where are my husbands? Where are my husbands? Do you get it? Of course you get it. Because it makes sense to us. That's what's important to Jesus. And so Jesus he spends his personal time with Peter, and he gives him a job. And he says, if you want to do what I want you to do, then you will take care of my bride. And you will make sure that she is fed, that she is protected, that she's nurtured. Yes? And it was Jesus' highest priority then. And God never changes. So what's his highest priority now? It's the same. It's the same. And so there's no accident that the enemy comes along and says, oh, you don't need to go there. That's not important. That's the pastor's job, or whatever else the enemy says. I don't care whether it's our money or our time or our talents. We want it for ourselves. But that's not what Jesus said. It certainly isn't Christian. Is it? No. And so Jesus sets up the church. Right? Then he's setting up the church. And the first thing he does is he makes sure that he has people like Peter who are loving, responsible people who have proved themselves over time. Now, Peter didn't do everything right. He didn't. He made all kinds of mistakes. But some of that's what formed Peter into the kind of guy that Jesus could use. And so in the early New Testament, we have things like this. This is Paul writing to Timothy. Now, the overseer, or elder, presbyteros in the Greek, must be above reproach. The husband of one wife, temperate, self-controlled, respectable, hospitable, able to teach, not given to drunkenness, not violent, but gentle, not quarrelsome, not a lover of money. He must manage his own family well and see that his children obey him with proper respect. If anyone does not know how to manage his own family, how can he take care of God's church? And so what's the first thing that happens? They go out and they set up a system, and they say, we have this bride, and it's so desperately important to Jesus. And then the Holy Spirit says, let's make sure we get the right kind of overseers to take care of it. And so that's supposed to still happen. And when I was ordained, they put you through a council, and it's not necessarily about the education on the wall, but some of that. But most of all, are you this person? Has God made you into this person? That's what's first to happen first. And so we see that it's important to Jesus that his bride's taken care of. Now, if it's the most important thing on Jesus' mind, shouldn't it be the most important thing on our mind? It should be. And so if we love Jesus, we should be taking care of his bride. We should be making sure that she's strengthened, that she's nurtured, and she's built up. It's not just Peter's job. It's certainly not just my job. It's all of our jobs. Yes. Right. So how can we do it? How can we do it? Often we don't feel worthy to do it. Right? This is his bride. How could we have anything to offer? But he says that's what we're supposed to do. That's where we're supposed to focus. And James, I'm not getting into it today, but he says, don't you understand? You're adulterers. You're adulterers. You're outside of the marriage, and you're focusing on all kinds of things except what you should be focusing on, which is his bride. I'm going to give you 4 things today that I think are good. It's not exhaustive. There's probably some more you could come up with, but I think these are good ways or things we could do to help build up the bride of Christ. Number 1, Spend time with her, right? Just spend time with her. Where are my brides out here? Where's my girls? What do you want from your husband? Most often, women and children spell love T-I-M-E. It just is. I'm like, we're not doing anything. It's okay. Just sit here. Right? I know. It doesn't necessarily make sense, but it does make sense. When people say, oh, I don't need the church. Yes, you do. You need the church, and the church needs you. I found this illustration this week. It's who's the woman that stays home with the kids and gets all stressed out? Anybody? Sometimes I stay home with my kids and I get stressed out. Even worse. There's a story I found. This woman had a horrible day, terrible day. She had 3 little kids, a couple of them in diapers. To make it worse, her husband did not come home on time, and she gets even more stressed out. So eventually he comes home. It's like 5:30, and she's like, where have you been? He's like, well, what does it matter? I'm trying to make money. And she's like, yeah, but I got all this going on. He's like, you don't even have anything to do. You just got to take care of some kids. And it just got worse and worse and worse. And pretty soon they're screaming at each other. The volume's coming up. And so he just says, wait a minute. I'm going to go outside. I'm going to knock on the door. I'm going to come in, and we'll start over. So he does. He goes out. Knocks on the door, comes in. Hey, baby. She's like, where have you been for the last 2 hours? I've been here. Well, I guess it's not that funny, but you get the point, right? Do you get the point? He wasn't there when she needed him. It doesn't necessarily matter where he was. It's the fact that he wasn't there. He wasn't spending the time. And then when he is there, sometimes we still aren't spending the time. We're just there, but we're not doing anything productive. We're not caring. And when his bride needs him, he's got to be there, yes? And so it weakens the home. It made her behave maybe less than what she probably wanted to, or maybe less than she desired to or knew she should. But likewise, the same thing happens in the church when we put other things above the bride. And I'm not saying this joke makes sense, because he does have to make money, right? But if she felt like she wasn't as important. And so that's what happens. And so I realize I'm preaching to the choir because you guys are sitting in church, but we need to realize that our presence together helps all of us. I can guarantee you this. If you put bottoms in the pews, I can preach better and teach better. Guarantee it. Why? I don't know why. It just happens. There's excitement, and there's people who are loving and feeding back to you, and it just works better. And so our presence together creates enthusiasm and brotherhood, and it helps us. And so if it's an important issue to Jesus, it should be important to us, and we should make the bride a priority by doing what? Spending time with her. And Chris is right on the money. Is he here right now? He says, where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, I am there with them. And so when we gather in his name, he joins us. Hallelujah. We don't have a God like these made-up gods around the world, or something carved out of wood. We've got a God who's everywhere and inside of us, and he desperately loves us, and he wants us to realize that and get together and spend time together. Secondly, what if we just speak words of love and comfort? Sometimes that's just what they need. I got daughters, 6 of them, and sometimes things aren't going well, let me tell you, And I have learned a little over the years to back it up a little bit with the dad stuff and just come on a little more strong with the listening and the love stuff. It just really helps. My wife has helped me. God knows it's true. She's like, what you say is not bad. It's just that the volume of your voice or the tenor of the thing hurts the bride, hurts the girl. I'm like, really? Yeah, that happens. We don't even do it on purpose. Now, there's this story I found this week, this little boy and little girl up in the attic, and they're digging around, and they found these old love letters. And so they're not supposed to be in them, but they're reading them anyway. And they're love letters from mom and dad, when he was in the army and she was at home, and they're going back and forth, and they're starting to chuckle about the words that they used, honey boo and danny doo and all this stuff. And he's like, wow. Little boy's like, that's not the words they use now. Right. All right. What happened? What happened to that wedding day and all about, I love you? Yeah, we start to annoy one another because we get selfish. We do. We get selfish, and that feeds off of itself, and it makes us even more selfish. I know preachers who've failed at this. It doesn't do good to belittle the spouse, does it? Boy or girl, girl or boy, it doesn't matter. It doesn't help to belittle them and insult them. And pastors do it, but a lot of times church members do it too, and they don't realize that the grumbling and the complaining and all that stuff that we do in the hallway, little pick here, little pick there, little complain about this, complain about that, the coffee's not right, the hallway's not right, this and that. Really? Wow, it's exhausting. Who can please everybody all the time? I know it's not right. I know it's not right. If I got 20 emails, which one would I focus on if 19 of them were awesome and one of them was grouchy? Right. I focus on that. I'm like, oh, I missed the mark. I hurt this person. I had a guy call me last week. He's like, we left your church. I'm like, I know I haven't seen you. How you been? I actually had reached out to him a couple of times. He's like, well, you really hurt my wife. You hurt her. I said, what did I do? He said, you were talking to this other person, and we walked up and we stood there for a couple minutes, and you acknowledged that we were there, but you kept talking to that person, and so we left. You hurt her feelings. You didn't even ask her about this trip she'd been on. And I just thought to myself, how can anyone meet everyone's needs all at the same time? And so then they start complaining, griping, and what happens? Yeah, I think we forget whose church it is, right? I think we forget, who we work for and who we're supposed to be loving, and it's not supposed to be like that. It isn't. They forgot whose church it is. They forgot whose bride it is. They forgot who they belong to. And so we start abusing the bride with our words, abusing the workers with our words, and with our attitudes. And it's not supposed to be that. What about this? Investing in her. Whose bride wants to be invested in? What wife wants to be invested in, right? I mean, it doesn't necessarily matter if it's huge or if it's little. It's just that you know that they care. And so if Valentine's Day does anything, it reminds us of the importance of focusing on the one we love, right? Just focusing on. In my house, we do something a little weird. I don't know if it's weird, but it's what we do. The boys, me, and now we got Andrew and Daniel, we're the boys in the house. And so we make a lavish dinner for the women. So the little girls, medium-sized girls, teenage girls, mom, we just make a lavish dinner. And it says to them, we love you. You guys do a whole lot more around here than we probably, do. And you love us more than we probably deserve. And we focus on her and them. Yes? And if we don't do that, our relationships start to falter and they start to get weaker. What's the best way to find out what your significant other wants for Valentine's Day? Huh? Ask her, right? I'm getting to the age where I don't even play around with this Santa Claus thing. I just write my wife a note, and I open a magazine, and I tape the note in there. I said, this is what I want right here, big arrows pointing to it. Put my credit card in there, whatever it takes. Whatever it takes. I know, it seems silly, but just ask her. We'll wait until the last minute and take a guess. Like the guys in Kroger. Never works. Never. You didn't put any thought into this. You didn't invest in this. It cost me $100. Doesn't matter. You just swipe the card. Right? That's not the way it's supposed to be. But see, husbands overlook that stuff, but so do church members. People come to church and they just sit there. They just sit there. I was counseling these people in my office, and the woman's complaint was, he just comes home and just sits there. He's like, well, I'm not drinking beer. I'm not beating you. He thought that was the standard. That's the standard. I'm not doing anything wrong. You're not investing. You're just sitting in the lazy boy. That's not how it works. Well, nobody asked me to do it. She never said anything. Get up and help. Right? I work all day. Well, she works all day. If you take and you look at the church, the same things happen. People will say, well, you're not feeding me. You know how many people have left this church? They said, I didn't feed them. Y'all wasn't getting fed. Really? Well, if I wasn't feeding you, then open up the Bible. You're old enough to feed yourself. Because I guarantee for a new Christian, I got something you haven't heard before. Highly likely anyway. Anyway, that's what happens. So we need to take the responsibility on ourselves to find ways to invest in her. What is it that you want, honey? What do you need? What is it that the church needs? How can I serve? Same thing happens. We don't just sit back and wait for somebody to come and tell us what to do. Every bride knows that's silly. That's not how it works. Anyway, 3 times Jesus says to him, "Do you love me?" And each time Jesus drives home how important it is for those who love him to care for his bride, to feed his bride, to nurture his bride, to love her. That's what he says. If you love me, then feed my sheep. And so if you want to do some form of ministry, I guarantee you we'll find a way to help you do it. Reach them, teach them, and right. Here's what happens. Here's what really happens. There's 100 people, and they'll say, well, you didn't call me. Oh, my God, I know. I'm sorry about that, but I got this, and I got that, and I got the other thing. And I guarantee if you show up and say, hey, is there something I can do? Oh, I'll find something. I'll find something. You just have to be there. You have to be there. Anyway, the last thing I think we can do, at least on my little list, is to help her family grow. Help her family grow. Who gets excited when they come to church and they see some old people come back or some new people? Who gets excited? Right? And God gets excited about that too. That's what he cares about. And so Jesus says to Peter, feed my sheep. Feed my sheep. Whose sheep are they? Jesus' sheep. I don't have any sheep. I'm a shepherd. Lord willing, if he continues to help me do that, I'll continue to try to do it well. And I'm supposed to be concerned about his sheep. And so I'm supposed to feed his sheep. I'm supposed to care for his sheep. And when you feed and care for sheep, guess what they do? They make 2 things. Wool and more sheep. That's what they do. They make wool and more sheep. And so then we're trying to do that in the children's wing. We have more people down there than we have down here, and I'm doing my part. But you guys got to know that inviting people to church is another way to make them grow, right? Invite people to church and help them build up the flock. We talk to people about Jesus. We try to live lives that reflect Jesus. If we shine that light and somebody wants to know what's up, we tell them where the light comes from. We invite them to church. I don't care if they come here or not. Get them to another church. Whatever it takes. Get them somewhere where they can know Jesus because there's no competition. You guys can come on up if you want. What is love? If Valentine's Day is about anything, it's about showing love. It's about modeling love. It's about saying, friend, lover, I love you, I care about you, and the same is true of the church. I found this neat story. I think that you'll like this. Let me read it for you. Helen Keller, who was completely blind, she lost her sight at 19 months. She had this severe infection. And she tells how she learned the meaning of love from her teacher, Anne Sullivan. The teacher was also half blind. Helen told her at their first meeting 3 months after she was 7 years old, this is what she did. The morning after my teacher came in, she led me into a room and gave me a doll. And when I had played with it a little while, Miss Sullivan slowly spelled onto my hand the word D-O-L-L. And she was excited when I finally spelled the word myself. And I ran downstairs to show my mother, Helen Keller writes. Several days later, Helen told of how Miss Sullivan pumped cold water on her hand and then spelled out on her hand, W-A-T-E-R. And so then she connected the water on her hand with the word, and then she could kind of say the word. Several days later, Helen told of how Miss Sullivan after learning how to spell hundreds and hundreds of words, Miss Sullivan spelled out the word L-O-V-E. on Helen's hands. Perplexed, Helen spelled back on Anne's hand, what is love? What is love? I don't want to get all teary, but I'm just telling you, that's what the world is doing. They're saying, what is love? And we're supposed to be saying, this is love. Deny yourself. Pick up your cross and follow Jesus and people see it. And when they see it, they can tell what it is. And they will either love it or they will hate it, but that's probably more on them. It is. They'll know it's love. They'll know it. Father, I pray that you make us those kind of people that just, the world just looks and says, I get it. That is love. Help us to be the hands and the feet that you want. Help us to draw the people, Lord, that you want us to serve. Help us to be a light in this community and the places around where we live. God, I'm just desperate to show people your love. I pray it in Jesus' name.